Did your family have any doors that were allowed to actually stay closed? Any room, physical or emotional, that was genuinely, fully yours? Any thoughts, opinions, or feelings that were fully yours, without someone needing to know them, weigh in on them, or subtly correct them until they matched the family's? If the honest answer is no, not really, you may have grown up in what family therapists call an enmeshed family system, and it's one of the most underdiagnosed patterns in childhood psychology, precisely because from the inside, it doesn't look like neglect at all. It looks like closeness. It's a strange kind of question to even have to ask, because in a healthy family, the answer is so obvious it barely needs saying. But for a lot of people, sitting with it honestly brings up something closer to grief than nostalgia. The concept comes from family systems therapy, originally described by psychiatrist Salvador Minuchin, who studied families with what he called diffuse boundaries, where the line between one family member's identity and another's essentially disappears. In a healthy family, everyone is close, but everyone is also still their own separate person, with private thoughts, individual preferences, and emotions that belong to them alone. In an enmeshed family, that separateness feels threatening, so it quietly gets dismantled. Sometimes with love, sometimes with control, and very often with both, tangled together so tightly you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Here's how it actually shows up. A parent treats their child less like a child and more like a built-in emotional partner, sharing adult worries, marital conflict, financial stress, or loneliness that a child was never equipped to hold, and needing that child to respond with comfort, reassurance, or advice. Your opinions weren't really allowed to be just yours. If you disliked a food the family loved, questioned a belief the family held, or wanted something different than what was expected, it wasn't treated as a normal difference. It was treated as a small betrayal, something to be corrected, teased out of you, or quietly punished with distance. Privacy wasn't really respected either. Diaries got read, doors didn't stay closed, and decisions that should have been entirely yours, what to wear, who to date, what to study, what to feel, somehow always ended up needing family approval first. And underneath all of it sat one unspoken rule, that closeness meant sameness. And any move toward being your own separate person was experienced by at least one parent as rejection. It's not always dramatic either. It's a parent who says, "We don't act like that in this family," about something completely ordinary. A mood, a preference, a harmless choice. It's feeling a specific, disproportionate guilt for wanting a night alone, as if needing space is the same thing as not loving someone enough. It's noticing you can list your parents' opinions on almost everything instantly, but pause when someone asks for your own, because you were never quite sure which parts of what you believed were actually yours. It's being the one who always knows how to calm a parent down, read their mood before they've said a word, adjust your entire emotional temperature to keep the household stable, a skill that looks like maturity and is actually a symptom. It's being unable to answer simple questions like, "What's your favorite movie?" or "What do you actually want for dinner?" without a flicker of panic. Not because you don't have preferences, but because you were never given enough uninterrupted space to discover what they were. It's feeling a strange, disproportionate homesickness for a childhood that, when you actually look at it closely, didn't feel very peaceful to live inside of, because closeness and comfort got wired together so early that missing the closeness can feel like missing the whole thing, discomfort included. It's noticing that even small, harmless secrets, a purchase, a plan, a new friendship, feel like they need to be reported, rather than simply lived. As an adult, enmeshment tends to show up as a persistent difficulty telling where you end and someone else begins. Many people from enmeshed families struggle to identify their own feelings in the moment, not because they're numb, but because they spent so long automatically scanning for everyone else's feelings first, that checking in with their own became an afterthought, if it happened at all. Guilt shows up disproportionately around ordinary independence. Moving to a new city, disagreeing with a parent, choosing a partner the family doesn't love, can trigger a level of anxiety that seems wildly out of proportion to the actual event. Because on some old, wordless level, separateness still registers as danger. Some people respond by staying tightly wound to the family well into adulthood, checking in constantly, deferring major decisions, quietly avoiding any choice that might register as rejection. Others swing hard the other way, building thick emotional walls, moving far away, going no contact, or avoiding closeness altogether in every relationship. Because closeness itself has become associated with losing yourself entirely. This same confusion tends to show up at work too. though it rarely gets recognized there. It can look like taking a manager's ordinary feedback as a verdict on your entire worth. Because in an enmeshed family, disapproval was never just about the one specific thing. It was about the whole relationship being at risk. It can look like struggling to make a decision, even a small one, without first mentally checking how a parent or partner would react. A habit so automatic it rarely even registers as a step, just a quiet, constant background presence in your own head. And it can look like feeling oddly disloyal for succeeding in ways your family didn't, or for building a life, a home, a set of values that look meaningfully different from theirs. As if your own growth is something that has to be kept quiet, to protect a bond that was never actually that stable to begin with. Neither response is wrong or broken. They're both attempts to solve the same unsolved problem: how to be close to someone without disappearing into them. This pattern often travels straight into romantic relationships too. It can look like codependency, feeling responsible for a partner's every mood, unable to relax until they're okay, mistaking that constant vigilance for love, rather than recognizing it as an old survival skill. It can look like losing your own hobbies, opinions, and friendships early into a relationship. Not from lack of interest, but because merging into someone else is simply the only closeness you were ever taught. And it can look like panicking at the first sign of healthy distance from a partner, a busy week, a need for solo time, interpreting normal separateness as the beginning of abandonment. Because in your first relationship, the family, separateness usually was. If this has been the water you grew up swimming in, here's where individuation actually starts. First, practice having a private thought on purpose. An opinion, a preference, a feeling that you don't immediately share or check against anyone else's reaction, just to prove to yourself you're allowed to have an inner world that's entirely your own. Second, when guilt shows up around a normal boundary, a closed door, a night alone, a difference of opinion, try naming it specifically. This is old enmeshment guilt, not evidence I'm doing something wrong. Because separating the feeling from the facts is often the first real crack in the pattern. Third, remember that boundaries are not the opposite of love. They're what makes real love possible in the first place. Because you can't actually be close to someone if there's no separate you there to do the connecting. And fourth, if this pattern runs deep, a therapist trained in family systems and differentiation can help you build the specific, unfamiliar muscle of staying warmly connected to people while still remaining fully, separately yourself. You were never meant to be an extension of anyone else's identity, needs, or moods. You're allowed to be your own whole person, closely loved, and still completely, unapologetically your own. And if the people who raised you can eventually learn to love that separate, whole version of you, that's a real gift worth welcoming. But even if they can't, or won't, your right to exist as your own person was never actually theirs to grant in the first place. It was always yours, quietly waiting underneath everything you were taught to give away.